welcome. We are here today with Pastor Michael and Pastor Bob, and they are here to help us with PTSD. So we know October has been Mental Health Awareness Month, and there's so much that we don't know about it. And why don't you just start us off with telling us a little bit about what PTSD is?
Probably easier in one sense to describe some of the symptoms. If somebody's had a very upsetting event, they've suffered through some sort of violent event, they've had some sort of trauma, emotional trauma, physical trauma, then they have certain symptoms that come up: nervousness, inability to sleep, kind of affects their affect, their ability to interact with other people, find themselves avoiding certain places, certain situations, other things. The list can go on, but in one sense it's a post, after the fact, to a trauma that you've experienced and the stress that you have gained in your life because of that event or events. And it can actually become a disorder, which is a mental condition, not like crazy, mad, lunatic, but it is listed basically as a mental disorder, depending on how the symptoms progress for you. But Bob is more the subject matter expert on this sort of thing than me, so you tell me how well I did on that.
Always so kind to me, Pastor Michael. Thank you. Thanks, Michelle, also for having us here and getting a chance to talk about this. I love what you said. That's very, very true. Sometimes we just talk about PTSD being a normal person's response to a really abnormal type of an event, something that is like Michael was sharing, something very traumatic. And so I don't think it's something that we need to be, it's a disorder in the sense that we recognize that it causes certain symptoms that can cause us trouble in functioning with normal daily life, but it's not something to be afraid of, or I think there's something that the person did that's wrong, that's suffering from this type of a disorder. It's a kind of a normal human protection almost to in a response to a really traumatic situation that has occurred with them.
Right. Well, as I was doing research too, I was just noticing like abuse and all of these things that people could experience and how often that occurs. So, I think so many times people feel alone in that, right? And so what are some symptoms that if they're experiencing them, they might know, hey, wait a minute, this is...
That's a very good question, and you're right. When you think about some of the things that you hear about PTSD, a lot of times people will think of first responders, firemen, policemen, soldiers that got a lot of attention about returning soldiers and stuff, but it's something that anybody in everyday life can experience. If you've ever been in a terrible traffic accident, somebody maybe in your family died as a result of that, all the things that can go with that sort of trauma. It's not just something for first responders or soldiers. It's something that can happen to anybody because it's real life stuff that everybody faces. So then back to your questions, they might have trouble concentrating. They might seem kind of jumpy or nervous. They probably very hyper vigilant. You walk into a strange place you've never been, you find yourself kind of looking around, everybody's wondering, what are you looking for? They don't necessarily know, but it's just a kind of a reaction that they're being kind of hyper vigilant. Difficulty sleeping, sometimes it leads to more and more sort of self-medicating with things like alcohol or other drugs, because it is a way it kind of makes them feel better. Can lead to some work, school problems, intimacy problems with family members, especially between a husband and wife, things. And like I said, the list could go on and on because everybody's different. The way they might manifest it is different. I mentioned earlier that sometimes it's just an avoidance of, use the car wreck one. Never going to drive on a highway again. There's an avoidance thing that I don't feel comfortable on the highway, so I don't care if it takes us 2 days to get to grandmother's. We're never going on a highway again to get there. That could be a reaction.
Yeah, that's really good. I'm glad you bring that up because it is different people respond differently, have different symptoms kind of manifest because of the trauma they've been through. So like Michael says, somebody might really be avoidant certain behaviors or stimulus that remind them of that. Other people may have other types of things, symptoms that develop as well. Some of the things also include memories kind of that re-traumatize the person, or really bad nightmares, or you know, something like you said, that a cue that reminds you of it. It just makes you flash back and have this terrible memory. And really at the extreme point, you can become like, you can disassociate, you can, like you're not even there. You can lose, kind of like even in a daydream where you sort of lose the conscious presence of where you are at the moment. It takes you back into your memory and you seem kind of lost. So that's very common to happen to somebody that's suffering from PTSD. Also things like just negative moods in general. So lots of anxiety or anger, fear can develop because of this. Depression is another thing. They call it kind of like comorbid, that kind of participates with PTSD quite often. And so that can become, you know, really challenging, that not only are you dealing with these bad memories, and you know, and then you have other things that are impacting you, because now you're depressed or you're anxious, and so your daily functioning becomes impaired. You know, they're really extreme cases, and so.
So is it something that people can expect that will eventually go away, or like what's the treatment? How can they deal with this?
Great question. It's important, I think, to differentiate too, that you could have gone through some sort of traumatic event, and of course you're going to have stress, maybe even post-traumatic stress. But notice that there's a D not on there. You could have PTS, which would just be a natural human response to a traumatic event. You might have a couple of sleepless nights. You might talk to a couple of family members about that was really scary, something like that. And then you go on with your life and get better. And so there is a distinction between post-traumatic stress versus post-traumatic stress disorder, where it seems to be a recurring of some of these symptoms that we're talking about here. And there are quite a number of ways that you can improve upon this, no matter what you've been through. And we'll talk about some of that here in a moment. I kind of want to shift it if I could. In my life, it makes it sound like it's all about me, but in my in my life,
sit in the middle.
You know, some people in the church know that I grew up in a violent, alcohol sort of fueled family of origin. Mm-hmm. Well, you're a little kid in that, but you're trapped. You can't just leave that environment because you're a kid, but the terror is very real. Mm-hmm. The sense of being trapped in that, with just how do I get through this? When is this going to revisit itself again here? You grow up with that for years, and before they ever even coined a phrase like post-traumatic stress disorder, I was displaying a lot of the things, the hypervigilance, the sleeplessness, the other things, short-fused anger, and you realize that, okay, you could be a child, you could come through something. It's not that you just saw something so terribly gruesome, but you certainly lived through a sort of gruesome existence of trauma, and you would be displaying this, but you don't know any better. But what I found in my case was it helped number one, to become a Christian in my case later on in life, because he does make us all new creations in Christ. But it helped along the way to talk to more knowledgeable people that were balanced, people who didn't experience that as their normal, and they could actually say, well, you know, you poor guy, that was not a normal way to have to grow up, and you know, you never thought about that. Yeah, that was not normal, and so suddenly it becomes a kind of a cognitive, behavioral sort of change in your life, even without going to a clinical psychologist, or something that somebody's helping you to reframe it, maybe start taking some different steps that, you know, if I hear a husband and wife arguing in a restaurant, I don't have to get a sick feeling in my gut. I'm safe. I'm just over here eating my meal. There's nothing bad about happening to me, but the reaction might be very strong inside you because of what you grew up and experienced.
I think you bring up some really great points, and thanks for talking about kids, because one of the things that when we're talking about everybody experiences it differently. That's for children as well, and so they might manifest some different kinds of symptoms from their PTSD if they've experienced something that's really traumatic like that. So whereas an adult might have a vivid memory, a nightmare that's sort of a reenactment of the event, they recall the car accident over and over in their mind that was so traumatic to them. A child might have a really terrible dream about monsters chasing them or something like that. So it might not be the exact kind of thing, but still they might have nightmares. For children, it might see like a regression in some of the normal training they've had, like they're potty trained and they start experiencing some type of abuse, sexual abuse or something. You might see them regress, like they might not be potty trained anymore. They might change their speech and regress in different ways like that. They might also role play some of the things that they've experienced, but you know, in ways that you notice are different from how they played in the past. They're destroying things or acting out a similar kind of scenario, but with their toys and different things. Other things you might notice would be things like a heightened sense of fear or of strangers or separation anxiety. You know, like we drop our kids off, but they never want to be away from their parents or some place they perceived as safe. That can kind of also be sort of some of the things that we see. And then just defiant behaviors or acting out in ways that aren't common. And so I think you kind of talked about some people might experience it more dramatically than others that have more difficult symptoms, and I think that's impacted by lots of different things. So their environment that they grew up in, whether they're in a supportive, healthy family environment, whether that's kids or adults, whether they have come from a place where they feel secure and safe and loved, whether they have a good community right now of friends and a support network. Could be a big difference to how somebody experiences the trauma and then recovers from it. And so you asked maybe, I think also just to touch on like how long does it last and things. I think you mentioned something about that, which is a great question because something like 85% of folks in their lifetime are going to experience some form of trauma, but not everybody's going to have long-term PTSD. So they say as about 8% of adults will experience really true PTSD in their lifetime where it's for an extended time, but about 50% of those people that have these kind of symptoms that we've been talking about that are really causing problems with their daily life. With good treatment and a support network, and when they're kind of confronting the trauma and processing through it, about 50% of them get over that with about 3 months. But then there's others that it might take 12 months or longer to a lifetime before they overcome it. So everybody's going to be different. And along that recovery, you could be doing great and still have times, just like if you've gone through guilt, or not guilt, but grief, you lost somebody that's really close to you that you love. You might kind of start getting back to normal at some point, but then you may come into a situation that just refreshes your memory of that person that you lost, and you just experience it all over. So trauma can be like that as well. So it could be 10 years from now and something could kind of trigger a memory that, it wells up in you. But then, with normal life and you move forward, you can overcome that. It doesn't have to be debilitating. But just to know that it'd be normal for something like that to happen for somebody that was suffering with PTSD.
So for people that are really struggling with it, what are some like treatments and things that they could be doing?
You want to go first?
Sure. Well, there's a few things that folks do when we talk about treatment. So the first thing is that support network around you that kind of normalizes your environment and makes you feel safe again. That's really, really important. So for family members, for friends, and people that have been through trauma, is to be able to be around them and be a support network to them. Being empathetic, enabling them to talk and process what has occurred in an environment where they're feeling safe and they know it's not happening again and again. So when people are truly traumatized, seeking out therapy can be really, really helpful, where there's some different techniques that the therapists use to help folks deal with trauma and overcome it and normalize it. Some of that is just mentally addressing the situation and realizing that you're not back in the same traumatic situation that you were in today as you were when the trauma occurred. And so talking about what that means, addressing feelings like sometimes there's a lot of guilt or anxiousness that comes up with this because you don't understand sometimes why this might happen. And so it's really just kind of having a safe place to process it through with somebody. So a therapist or counselor can really, really help somebody think through that clearly and just sort of reframe and understand what occurred and know that you're safe now and can move forward in life in a healthy way. Sometimes that, and depending on the nature of trauma, sometimes that means going back to revisit, to expose yourself to that sensitive thing. If it was a car accident, to drive in a car safely in a really kind of controlled environment. So you had a traumatic car accident, and so you don't want to be in the car anymore. So some types of therapy, you might take a short car ride in the parking lot, and then you might just take a ride around the block. But something that kind of desensitizes you and helps you realize that you're really safe again. And so, but counselors can have all different kinds of approaches for that. There's a really exciting technique now called EMDR, which is an eye desensitization technique where it helps persons access their memories without it being emotionally so challenging. And so they're able to then think more clearly about it in a more rational, non-emotional type of way and experience it so that in a way that when they remember it, they can associate more safety with their memories. So it's not like they're not re-traumatized every time they think through that situation.
I really like a lot of what Bob just shared with everybody, and so for a more simple guy like me without all of his training, the idea of kind of incremental steps is kind of key to it. When the trauma happened, it probably, unless, like I said, it's a childhood thing like I was given, or an abusive marriage sort of thing that's over and over and over again long term. Most of the time it's never saw this coming and it suddenly happened. Soldier had to kill somebody in a bad way on a battlefield. A car accident happened. There was sexual assault. It was like, didn't see this coming. Had no idea that whenever I woke up today, this was what was going to greet me today. And so you couldn't stop the trauma happening, but you can, whether through a therapist or just a good friend, or if you're married to somebody that they're displaying some of these symptoms. I want to help them. You can kind of help them, talk about it first. What was that like for you? That may be tough, but I mean, that's an incremental step. Do you remember about that? And then if you hear a lot of self-recrimination, I was so stupid, I should have never been on that street that night, it's like, well, you don't have a crystal ball, and if you did, it wouldn't work anyway, and things happened. Let's not focus on that. You were on the street, so what was that like for you? So it's a incremental step, and then how did you feel, and you kind of help to normalize the trauma of what they've gone through. That's what I've done for so many years with soldiers, is simply just talk to them about, so what was that like for you? Whether they had to do something really terrible that haunts them to this day. We put a lot on young soldiers. I mean, they're only 20 years old. We expect them in a moment's notice to make a life and death decision at 20 years old. And sometimes those decisions they make haunt them. Same thing for first responders. I can guarantee policemen right now in society, where you see that every act is being questioned, no matter what the policeman does, there's this sort of intense pressure they're under, that they have to make these momentary decisions, but they're going to have to live with it after that. So just being able to start talking to them about what was that like for you, kind of a non-judgmental thing, just want you to talk about it and get them to kind of replay it. As painful as that is for them, as hard as that is, because it does bring up the trauma again, that's kind of the path forward. It's like, now we can talk about it. You hear some affirming words, mainly that it's not your fault that you were on the street, it's just a street. You should have been able to be on that street. You didn't do anything wrong by being there, and it kind of has an affirmation to it. Eventually you can move on to some other things. And I know ladies who have been victims of sexual assault that, you know, they wouldn't even go back if it happened in another country. It's like, I'm never going back to that country again. But one lady that I know, her husband, I guess, didn't pay much attention to the fact that she'd had a sexual assault, so he booked a cruise to go to that country. I thought I'd love to be a fly on the wall of that stateroom as, you know, they're sailing toward this thing, and she's got all these emotions that are probably welling up that I don't want to be here, I don't want to be going toward that. And he was thinking he was doing something nice for her, but realized after the fact that, yeah, probably a little bit of a dunderhead on that, was not thinking through what that was going to do to her. But you can eventually move, like you said, into the car, into another country, stay in the Army, have another assignment. You can move, but it's kind of incremental steps. That's what I heard. And sometimes the first incremental step is just talking about it. What was it like for you? Just something as simple as that.
That's a good one to write it down. What was it like for you? Okay, so what's step 2? You know, if you're talking to somebody who you realize is really struggling, and you get to the what was it like for you, what's
Listen
next?
a whole lot more than you talk. That's step number 2.
We need that one too, right?
But that's something that any loving family member can do for somebody. If they know, I can see you're struggling with this, a husband for a wife for a returning soldier or a policeman, a parent for a child that lived through a bad accident, that 3 of their friends were killed or whatever. What was it like for you? And then listen. I'm not here to tell you it's all right, because it's not all right. It's upsetting to you, but I can listen.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about that. It really reveals a lot about how God created us, and that we were made in His image as relational beings, and we get through this life in relationship with others, and we process trauma in relationship with others in a healthy way. We can get through it when we are supported by others, and because this is how we get through challenges in life, and that's how God created us as people, to get through this life in relationship with Him as well as with each other. And so I love what you're saying about that. Of course, you can get through this without the professional help, because it's really based on relationships. Sometimes we need the professional help. Sometimes it's just having that close friend or family member provide a safe environment for us to be able to process and talk about what has occurred. And be able, in that process of talking about it, to be able to integrate that experience in a way that is a healthy memory for us to be able to move forward in life in. Sort of being able to integrate our experiences and realize that we can move forward and still be safe. So all those practical things that you're talking about, listening carefully, spending time with somebody in a safe environment so that they know they're safe, just hearing them out, helping them with everyday tasks. Those are real practical things we can do for folks that are struggling with PTSD. Giving them private time, but in a place where they know that they're safe, so they're not rushed, because as Michael says, not everybody's the same, and this is a process. So give them time to work it out and work it through, because it takes time. It takes time to heal from our pains.
And it doesn't mean that you can't ever kind of break through if you're recognizing that they're being symptomatic. You know, either anger, sadness, you know, alcohol abuse or something like that. You know, Bob and I both are old soldiers and have spent time in war zones and all. He's a combatant, I'm not, so in one sense it's a different role that we play. Well, I'm never going to be required to fire a shot and kill somebody like Bob would as a soldier. I'm, as the chaplain, the one that's dealing with a lot of death and the reality of death on the battlefield for soldiers and commanders and all. And so I remember when I came back from Iraq, I think the Army thought in their tender mercy they were going to send me to a little sleepy assignment in Alabama to kind of decompress. It was probably a tender mercy. It didn't feel like that at the time. After you've been working about 18-hour days and you're in a combat zone and stuff, it felt like time was standing still in Alabama. And I remember I was trying to get the internet and the TV cable there, and the guy they sent had to be the laziest person I think I've ever met. And be like, I want the thing up here. Oh, you know, that's going to be a whole lot of work. It'd be so much better if you put it down here. Well, I don't want it down there. I want it up here. That's where I want to have the desk. That's going to be a lot of work on me. And finally, you know, I kind of just blew my stack. And I remember Laura at one point saying, honey, do you hear yourself? I mean, it was really going, and I thought, yeah, what? You know, this guy's a real jerk, you know. But it's okay to enter in sometimes to stop them, you know, from just repeating a sort of harmful pattern. That I think she recognized that, okay, this isn't you. I don't want this to be you. This is the new you. We're going to have to work on the new you a little bit.
Well, I think you bring up a great point here in that we haven't talked about really, which is, you know, maybe the person that's actually experiencing trauma may not fully realize that they're having some of these symptoms in their lives, like you're talking about, you know. You may not really intrinsically realize it. I mean, our wives of our youth, as you like to say, I really don't recall some of the things that I did when I came back from one of my last deployments, but my wife is quick to remind me that I wasn't quite the same Bob, you know, especially when I first came home. And I don't really remember some of that exactly. And maybe I didn't experience some of those memories as the same as she did. But so it is important for our family members and our loved ones to be kind of tuned in and observant, and to point that out to us and draw our attention to it when we maybe not always realize, you know, how we're responding to daily life, because we're sort of, you know, skewed a little bit in our current affect, so to speak. So
right.
I think that's really important. Another thing that I was thinking about what you were sharing, which is sometimes we think about trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, as being, well, it's happened to you, and so you may develop this. But I think you bring out a very good point that it also it could happen to somebody can experience deep trauma by observing something that happened to somebody else. So it may be, so if you know that your close family member has experienced a trauma, they've been through a traumatic car accident or a traumatic experience in wartime, or they, you know, somebody that you're really close to, or you experienced that like you did over and over and over with people that you care about, your soldiers, and you see that, then that's also can be causing these types of symptoms to develop, and that's that we know is PTSD. We're just observing it to somebody that's close to us that we love.
I really want to stress that, you know, the worst case of PTSD, not just post-traumatic stress, but PTSD, is really quite able to improve pretty rapidly. And a lot of it sometimes is helping the person to gain insight. In this church, for instance, we have a lot of military members, but quite frankly, where the church is located and the folks that attend here, most of them are fairly senior officers or non-commissioned officers that attend here. Good luck trying to tell one of them as a commander or a leader or a first sergeant or something like that you seem to be showing some signs of post-traumatic stress or whatever, because their view is, I'm here to take care of everybody else. Their view is, I'm here to protect all these soldiers. I'm here. That's we put that on commanders. Commanders make a lot of decisions, and they're crucial decisions in faraway places that they alone are responsible for. So they feel that, and so you may be married to one of those. Like I said, you may love them and try to talk to them that, you used to drink one drink every couple of nights, and now you're drinking 5 drinks a night, and be ready for the explosion that comes. And I'm under a lot of stress, and do I ever slur my speech? Do I ever do that? But you do have to care enough to enter in and try to give a little bit of cognitive recognition that you seem to be going through something here, and I love you. And what usually happens is, the poor spouse will start feeling fear that this seems out of control. To me, it's a stress agent of them. That you've changed. You're not the same Bob. Things have changed here, and I don't know what to do, but it scares me. And so they don't always do the listening twice as much as talking. Sometimes they jump in there and it just kind of starts mixing up. But recognize that at this church, we probably have some senior officers that are under a lot of stress, displaying a lot of these symptoms, maybe having symptoms of the disorder itself. But the hardest thing would be for them to ever admit that, because I'm a commander, and I take care of others. I don't need anybody to take care of me.
And that's a great point, and to also say that it's nothing to be ashamed of if that happens. And in fact, most, like you stated, most recover. Like, resilience is the norm. But God created us. We have amazing bodies and amazing minds. Resilience is the norm. We can get through this, and you'll get through it a lot quicker and be a lot healthier if you're confronted with it and you confront the situation and process through it with these kind of things we've been talking about.
So in answer to your question about how do you do it, I think the main thing is, I try to get them to talk about what it's like, listen twice as much. I think you pray a whole lot. I encourage them, it's always great, because I do believe that all things are new in Christ. Once they become a Christian, He can give them a new mind, He can give them a new spirit, a new heart. But if they are already a Christian, I find it helpful for me to remind people that Philippians 4 is just as true for them when they start feeling the stress or the fear or whatever the symptom is, that praying about everything, being anxious for nothing, works for you just like it does the rest of us if you do it by faith. And so between a loving family or family member or entire family, between good solid Christians, which is why you ought to be going to a nice church like this where people have had a lot of life experiences are here and they're at different stages of their spiritual walk, practicing your personal devotion. And I would say, don't be ashamed to get some help. If I told somebody, let's go back to that commander, that I don't need any help, if he wanted to have his slice on his golf game fixed, he could take me. I'm not a psychiatrist. He could take me out to the driving range. We could get 1,000 balls, and maybe about 950 balls later, I might have his slice straightened out a little bit. Or he could pay $100 to a pro and hit 5 balls and have it straight as an arrow. 5 balls later, there's a sense that there's no shame, and do the smart thing. Besides just loving family members, good Christians, your own personal devotions, don't be ashamed to think, I'll take advantage of you. You're in the military. Most of that's free for you anyway. Just make an appointment and go talk to somebody. If you're a first responder, I would think the county has got that for you as well.
That's great. What else do you think we should know about helping someone with PTSD? If, they're kind of resistant or they're not seeing those symptoms, how else could we help our family members?
Well, I think what we've talked about already is that it's normal, and so it's not something to be feeling ashamed about, and that it's healthy. God, Psalms 139, we're fearfully and wonderfully made. God made our bodies incredibly complex, and we're gonna have reactions to trauma, and those are normal, and so let's deal with it. We see lots of examples. If you want to, take a Christian view of what trauma, we see lots of examples of traumatic things in Scripture, and that Christians and believers went through. And so it would be not normal for us to think. It would be more abnormal to think that we're not going to have some kind of trauma in life. And so it's really more about just facing those things when they occur and doing it in a healthy and environmental way. And we've mentioned some scriptures already. Psalm 46 about just be still and know that I am the Lord, and allowing Him to come and be providing the peace that it's talked about in Scripture, and knowing that He's in control of all things is, I think, something that as Christians we do enjoy that as another resource in our lives that can give us incredible peace, even in the midst of the storm and the challenges that we are going through.
Yeah, I always love that He's working all things for our good and His glory, so even though we don't see it at the time because it doesn't feel good. But ladies, if you have other questions that you want to post, we can always come back and ask them later. But before we go, I so appreciate you both taking the time to do this. Is there anything else that you think we should know?
Just know that, in one sense, I may never be, it's kind of ironic, I do a lot of marriage counseling.
Mm-hmm.
So in my office, I have a lot of people arguing with each other in front of me. There's an irony of that, I don't like to see married couples fighting, and it brings up bad feelings and bad memories in me. But, I don't know that I'll ever not have that bad feeling, even whenever I'm trying to help somebody because of what I grew up with. But I can recognize it. Like I said, okay, Michael, you're here to help them. It has nothing to do with you. You're going to go home to Laura and the dog, and everything's going to be okay. You're just going to try to help them. It's the same thing. If a soldier has been through terrible trauma, seen horrible, gruesome things, he may never eat another spare rib in his life. But if he can get to the point and realize that I still don't want to eat the spare rib, but I don't have to just have this sort of controlling feeling. Same thing for a woman if she's had some sort of attack or something like that. I can reclaim my life. I may always be a little scared when it's dark outside and I'm walking to the car and I'm still going to have my car key out and ready to go, but it doesn't have to be controlling. And so it's not that, somehow or another this ever goes away for some people. It may, in one sense, always be there, but it doesn't have to be controlling. It doesn't have to be something that you don't recognize what's going on. I think that's a healthier place to go. But praise be to God for a lot of folks. He does just make things completely new. They can go on to a totally different life.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. I'm as well. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so, our mind is incredible, agile. It's like a muscle, and it trains and grows. So if you don't deal with it, and you're gonna be stuck in this repetitive cycle of negative thoughts and fear and anxiety and depression and all these really challenging symptoms of PTSD. So much better, as Michael suggested, and as we've been talking about, to just confront it and deal with it, because there is healing for you through the process of confronting the trauma. There is healing in rethinking through what occurred and processing it, to where truly your mind can be transformed, and how you experience it and how you experience life in the future can be much more positive and healthy, and not have to be overshadowed and dominated by the trauma that someone has experienced in the past.
So if any of your ladies view this and they want to talk further, Bob and I are both available to talk. Typically, like I said, what I find is one spouse will recognize that is so my husband, that is so my wife, what do I do, and we'll give you the best advice we can to try to get them to come in and start talking about some of this stuff. But I mean, it may be that you are, next to Christ, their best hope that they have.
That's awesome. I appreciate you guys taking the time to be here. So, ladies, you heard it. If you need any extra help, they're always here. And you can also email women@burkecommunity.com.